Folks, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show. And I have done almost 2,000 interviews on my program with all different types of healers who provide a multisensory and non-Western pedagogy in their practices. Their stories help to complete the circle of artistic authenticity which we all strive for. The cats I interview have been making a living on the bandstand for the last half century. They have dealt with good leadership and bad. They've had come to different understandings of what love is. They have overcome a lot of adversity in their lives, and they are adept at playing all musics. For me, nowadays, labels and names have really gotten in the way of our ability to create communal spiritual music. The bean counters want to pigeonhole and brand music. The cats have had an impact on so many records that my generation and older generations have lived off for years. They play little parts and serve the song as conduits for information coming through them from the heavens. For the most part, the cats had a chance to play with the original masters of the music and learn to get out of their own way to become part of the musical conversation. Thankfully, when the record business was actually an industry, these artists had the opportunity to gain name recognition through their work as accompanists and leaders by weaving in and out of different musical styles. One thing I've realized and been humbled by is the opportunity that has been given to me to gain knowledge and wisdom from the musicians, whose tales I share with people in all parts of the world via the internet. Call it mass distance education, if you will. I have the opportunity to talk with individuals who have been on this earth longer than myself, have experienced societal shifts, and have invented and reinvented themselves in different musical settings in different parts of the country. As a rogue journalist, I'm searching for the fine line of connection from mind to body to soul. That's where the spirit emerges and what my whole show is about. How to create spiritual music. Maxine Weldon, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
It's an honor to have you, Maxine, first guest of the new year. You know, I'm curious if one of the first time that you were able to experience what is commonly known in today's 21st century as Black Wall Street in Tulsa.
I had heard about that from my parents. In fact, I have a picture of the Black Wall Street here in my house. And it was a very affluent area. I was born in Oklahoma, but I wasn't born in Tulsa, but I was born in Wetumpka.
Right.
And I had heard so much about that from my parents.
What specifically? It's always getting. It's like become a caricature of itself. I mean, I think it's important to recognize it for what it was in the holiday. But what did your parents? Was it just the pride and the fact that it was completely black commerce owned in area?
It was. It was. You know, when they brought the black people over from Africa, you know, a lot of people thought they were ignorant and stupid, but they brought people that were educated. In fact, they built this country.
That's right.
And so, you know, it didn't get really stupid until later on when they disenfranchised people. They didn't give them education and whatever. But the people that they brought over here were educated. And they brought over doctors and lawyers and builders. And so when after the Emancipation Proclamation and the slaves were free, they built their own communities. And then it was the uneducated white people who got jealous and didn't want them to, didn't want them to be affluent, and went and bombed them and killed them. And Tulsa wasn't the only city that happened to. It happened to many cities in the South.
During that time, what other cities in the South were like that and were attacked?
Now, oh boy, I should have done my homework.
I know. This is Jake Fine. You got to get you on the ball, man. No, you know what it is. I want to. You know what it is. Okay, I want you to just talk about why the pride and what the story. Maybe one of the the things that stick with you about what your parents, why they were so proud of that of that area.
It was the pride that we could stand on our own 2 feet. Had that not happened, we would have been equal to, nobody. We would have had our own affluency, and but out of jealousy and ignorance and stupidity, all these uneducated, because the white people didn't build anything. The slave owners didn't want them building. They didn't, because a lot of these the people they brought over from Europe, criminals. They were not educated people.
Right. The indentured servants who were white. Yes. And ultimately, they got a plot of land, but after the Emancipation Proclamation, slaves were for a minute were actually completely free to build their own communities.
Yeah, they didn't want them to strive. They wanted to keep them down because they was. Oh, someone is trying to call. I'll just disregard.
Yeah,
that.
This is more important,
I'll just because I get calls from people I don't even know.
No, you're good.
Especially on a landline. On cell phone is not too bad, but I can hear better on the landline than I can sometimes on the cell phone. Because when you get my age, you lose your hearing and everything.
I know. My parents are that age. I know. I get it. We'll all be there someday, so it's okay.
Yeah. Well, after singing for over 60 years with microphones in your ear, that affects your hearing.
Oh, are you kidding? Come on. Absolutely. It's. But I'm curious about. I read about your family background. I'm just. I've interviewed so many cats. Mm-hmm. Joe Sample, Wilton Felder, Stix Hooper, Wayne Henderson. I haven't interviewed Stix, but Wayne, Wilton, and Joe, they were some of my earliest interviews, and they really helped me find my voice. And, they're from the 5th Ward in Houston. Ultimately, they had the bravado and the sort of wherewithal to pick up and move to Southern California just because it was not as bigoted, not as racist, and it was just a very sunny, it seemed like there was opportunity for all there. And I'm wondering why your family, if that was why your family moved out there.
Yes, it was. When my grandparents were already in California, and so my dad and my mom, we were the last of the Weldons to move from Oklahoma to California. We moved to Bakersfield, and so that was when Bakersfield. It was, Bakersfield was a little racist, but it wasn't bad. It wasn't some of the, it wasn't bad like the South.
No, and actually, just to be clear, it's so interesting because so many cats from Oklahoma moved to Bakersfield. Yeah. Including guys like Merle but whereas a lot of other cats, maybe from Arkansas, or they might have moved to Oakland, or Houston might have gone to Southern California. But yeah, Bakersfield, for what it was at that time, was okay. I think compared to Oklahoma.
It was.
Yeah.
And of course, that was work there, and with my dad and my uncles. They, instead of going, we worked in the fields. Well, I was little for a minute or two. But my dad joined the union. My dad and my uncle were one of the first black men to join the. I think it was the CIO or AFL, one of them, before they merged.
Wow.
And they built, the highways and Edwards Air Force Base, and so we really thrived. Our family really thrived in Bakersfield. Although later on, as I grew up and finished high school and college, I knew I had to move away because there was nothing. I've always had this roaming, feeling inside of me. I had to hit the highway, I'm like Merle Haggard.
Absolutely. No, dude, on the road like Jack Kerouac,
So I had to move from Bakersfield because I didn't feel, although I went to nursing school and I had a good job and whatever, there was just something that there was something out there that I needed to see and to do and to be. And so Bakersfield was always, to me, a good place to be from as opposed to live. You know?
Absolutely. No, I couldn't. My brother was the head of the paper there for a minute, he's now the head of one of the papers up in Boise, Idaho, and it's just so much healthier and it's so much. You know, Bakersfield is especially in this modern times, it's pretty toxic environmentally, and it's just not very. You just don't feel a lot of light there. But in any event, were you looking back on it? Obviously, you were jonesing to get on the road and see what else was out there and find your purpose in life. But can you just talk a little bit about that time, about the viability of being a professional musician, singer, or player? Because in today's world, it's almost, outside of big name acts that have been playing their top 40 hits for the last 50 years and can make millions of dollars. I mean, younger original artists, they can play for the door, they can pay to play. And I'm not saying that like there wasn't a lot of like people getting ripped off. There obviously people did get ripped off. It wasn't the greatest business in the world, but I see in today's society this idea, especially from corporate structures, that music is a musician's gift to the world, as opposed to being a viable profession. I know you said you had a nursing degree, but looking back at that time, was a musician seen as a viable profession in America?
Well, at that time, I didn't know too many musicians. I was my sister, Ann, she had gone off to claim her fame in music, and my brother Charles, they had a group, Diamonds and Pearls. They had this group. They had a big hit in the 60s. But I was like the last of the Weldons to get into show business. And I didn't start in show business until I moved to Hawaii. And I was working. I was the first black nurse to work at Kapi'olani Hospital. In fact, in 1961, that's where President Obama was born.
Wow. You were there?
I worked there. I worked there in 1960.
So you you were employed at that hospital when Barack Obama was born.
I wasn't working there when he was born. I was.
You were there a year before. That's still pretty amazing. Yeah.
The year before he was born.
Sure.
I worked there in 1960. He was born in 1961. But I was the first black nurse to work at Kapi'olani Hospital.
Wow.
And so that's when I decided to start in show business. I mean, and in fact, I had met Hannah Brooks. And Hannah Brooks said, well, if your sister Ann can sing, you seem like you should be able to sing too, So she said, give it a try. And I did, and I got a job at a club called the Back Street, and that's where it all started. I worked there, I think, about 6 months, and I had a friend who was a dancer, and she went to Japan, and when she got there, her agency said, ask her if she knew any black singers, and so she recommended me. So they sent a representative from Tokyo to Hawaii to hear me, and then they offered me a contract with 6 months, with a 6-month option at $250 a week. That was in the 60s. That was big money,
Absolutely. I want to just stop for a second. Why, if you had a good job nursing, what was the turning point for you? You were in show business. You started in show business or in music?
I started in music. I started singing in Hawaii.
Okay, so what was the first, ultimately that seminal moment when it was like, okay, I'm hooked now. Like when did the music find you, and where you walked away from a secure life to an insecure life?
Well, my dad was always musical. There was always music in our family. So I used to singing, and when I was in high school, I was always on some program, some talent show or something. But I still didn't know what it was that I wanted at that time. This is like when you're like 17.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And so it was when I got to Hawaii, it was Hannah Brooks who who encouraged me to become a singer. I don't know if you remember Hannah Brooks or not.
Well, no. So I'm curious. I don't know that name. So who is that? And then how did she even find? How did she? She knew you from your family's reputation.
No, she knew. Yeah, she did, because my sister had worked in Honolulu.
Ah, okay.
And so Hannah Brooks was a very famous pianist and singer herself. She did movies and she was working at this club that I started working with, a club called the Backstreet. She was working there as an entertainer, and I went to see her. She was the first singer that I had ever met, And so I went up, introduced myself, and I told her, my name's Maxine Weldon, and I'm working at the Cafe Lani, da-da-da-da-da-da. And she said, "You're Ann Weldon's sister." I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, if Ann can sing, you should be able to sing too." And I thought, I went home that night and I thought about it. I said, I've been singing like in high school and whatever. But then, there was that little voice inside said, "Well, give it a try, And that's how I started.
Would you say that, I'm curious, I remember a legendary guitar player for Little Feat, Fred Tackett. He was talking to me about getting picked up by this Filipino group in the States, and then they wound up in Honolulu playing, and they were singing a lot of Jimmy Webb tunes, and ultimately a couple of guys showed up at the club, and one of them was Jimmy Webb, and he got connected, and next thing you know, Tackett's back living with at Jimmy's house with the Monkees, and that was sort of the beginning of the end. So that was the beginning of the beginning. So you're saying to me that while you were singing there, you got a contract to play overseas in Japan?
Yes, I spent 4 years in Japan.
Now, so talk a little bit. It's so interesting because, I don't like labels, and I made that very clear in my intro. But whatever that word jazz means, essentially, so many of the cats they might live in the States, but their music is consumed, and the commerce is driven in Europe and in Japan. So what were you singing at that time? Was it
a combination of things? I did, of course, being from Bakersfield, you're going to always sing some country and western.
Right.
And blues and standard songs, and I really wasn't into jazz as if you want to call it that. At that time, I had listened to it, but I think I was more into just, songs that I liked.
I did. What was it like? Maybe in Japan, but a woman of color singing country and western tunes. Can you just talk about playing that to an audience, especially during the height of yeah.
My agent told me that I was singing songs like Old Man River and Summertime,
right,
and songs like that. And he said, Maxine said, if you learn to sing in Japanese, you can stay here as long as you want to. And he said, we'll teach you songs. And they did. So I would do...
they taught you Japanese folk songs, or they taught wow.
That's how I stayed there so long, because I could sing in Japanese. And later on, I learned to speak it. I wasn't really that fluent, but I could get around town,
Did they ever put you with shakuhachi flutes or anything where it was in a traditional Japanese folk setting?
I like the folk songs. That was a few of the newer songs that I would sing, but I sang mostly the folk songs. I like that the folk songs had they do the same thing in their throat that black people do in their throat when they're singing gospel.
Wow.
I don't know how to explain that, And the folk songs were just beautiful. And those are the songs that I learned to sing.
Can you riff on one right now? I'd love to hear something.
Let's see. Let me see if I can. This is early in the morning.
I know. No,
it's... Here's one. This is a song from a city in Japan, in the southern part of Japan, called Takamatsu. And this is one of the first Japanese songs I learned to sing, called Nangoku Tosa. I'm going to sing just a little bit of it.
Yeah.
Nangoku Tosa o ato ni shite 都へ来てから行くとせぞ思い出します東京の友が角にね歌ったよさこい節よ.
Wow, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for that. So, I mean, this is interesting. I mean, as best you can try to articulate it, what was the way the sanctified churches, how did people get their throats ready that was similar to the Japanese to sing?
Well, we sing. I was from a church called the Church of God, and we sang songs like. Let me think. I do remember.
Like Dixie Hummingbirds tunes, or was it even before that?
I guess it was kind of before that. I'm trying to think. And here's the one song. Once again we come to the house of God, and united songs and praise. That was one of our songs.
I dig. Totally. Yep.
Yeah, it kind of had that same kind of throat turning over kind of thing.
It's a turning over of sorts. Yeah, I dig.
Yeah.
Going back, I want to be clear about something. When you, the church that you went to, was there, tambourines? I'm sure there wasn't was there any rhythm, or was it all vocal? Because it
was all vocal.
Okay.
And it was both black and white people.
Wow.
And it was not all black. It was a very small sect. And I think some of them stem from the Mormon church.
I want to be clear. This is in Bakersfield?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Wow. A mixed race.
They had churches all over. They had them in Oklahoma. They had them in Missouri. They had, I think there's one other place that they had them. They had this particular church, but it was called the Church of God, Evening Light Saints.
So these were specifically churches that had mixed people of all different people of color.
Yes, wow. It was all mixed.
Wow, that is fantastic.
And it wasn't. Black people had their own churches, the Baptism, whatever. But in this particular sect, they stuck together, and they're still together today. These churches still exist. I haven't been to one in a long time, but I know they still exist,
Do you have any idea why or how your folks decided to join a church like that? I mean, to me, it's the first I've ever heard of any church like this. I think it's phenomenal.
My grandmother was a minister, and I think she was the one that I guess got the family involved in this particular church. That's the only thing that I can.
You know what it is? I'd like you to just talk about how you view, because it was such a progressive point of view in some ways, I guess, or maybe just humanistic way of seeing things. How do you come down on, I don't want to say the original sin of this country, but just that sort of underlying thread that seems to consistently be picked up on by my daughters and younger generations, and also the media today, and just this whole idea of that America is just a racist. It's a white.
Well, it started with President Woodrow Wilson. He was the one that really started the white supremacy movement.
Okay. Really?
Yeah. And, changed a lot of things. That's when the daughters of the revolution started putting up statues all over the country. And
interesting.
So that was some white people who just did not want black people in power, period.
And you're saying that was kind of like late 1800s or early? Is that kind of roughly around the time? What years was that?
When Woodrow
yeah, when he first started to throw down the gauntlet, yeah.
Oh, this was before my time.
No, totally. Like late 1800s, you say, or what? Do we have a date on that? I'm just curious about when they put up those statues.
You know, I'll have to get a date on that. Maybe we should talk again, and I'll have some dates for you.
No, it's fine. So your grandma was part of sort of the pushback against that. Is that fair to say?
Kind of, sort of. You know, she wasn't that political at all.
Absolutely, but that doesn't mean you can't be, an activist. You know.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that since that was in my environment, I was never afraid of white people.
Right. That's more what I was trying to get at. Is what's your concept of? I just sort of believe that we are.
We're all the same.
We're all one human race. I mean, a lot of people don't want to hear that, but I just feel like you must. I would love to know your perception of that, considering you were brought up, especially spiritually, in a very open environment.
Well, my dad used to say, there are good people, there are good white people, there are good black people, there are bad white people, there are bad black people.
Right.
And you can't say, if you see a white man, you can't say he's a bad person until you really know he's a bad person. And in other words, you give a person a chance to let you know what side of the fence that he's on. And so, and even when I was in grade school, I went. It was all in California. It was all integrated. I've never gone to a full all black school.
Yeah, it was was it late 50s?
Yeah.
Yeah, mid to late.
I started to a high school in 1954.
When you were in Japan during the civil rights movement of that kind of 10-year period, were you keeping abreast of the situation in the States and how much? A
little bit. I wasn't. There it was sort of, you didn't hear too much.
Well, definitely then. I mean, there was no internet. I don't even know how you were getting your news at that time.
Video,
yeah.
And there were a couple of, I would listen to the Armed Forces radio.
Right.
And that was all throughout Southeast Asia. And that's where I hear all the music, all the when Motown came into being. This is like in the 60s. I went to Japan I was there from 1961 to 1965.
Wow.
And so, I knew all the music, and of course, when President Kennedy was killed, I was in Japan at that time, and that was on television, But all the places that I went in Japan, I never found any or felt any kind of prejudice or whatever. I lived very well there. I guess because I could speak the language.
Well, no, I'm going to tell you why. They respected you. They respected the musicians as geniuses. They didn't care what color you was. I mean, that was with the John Hendricks. I don't know if you ever got a chance to meet him, but the great singer.
I have heard of him. Yes.
Yeah, I interviewed him a few years ago, and. He just said to me, he's like, without the Sicilians, there'd be no jazz in America. Only because those cats recognized the genius of people of color. I mean, they used to. I mean, whatever you want to say about it, they gave them jobs. They put them up on the bandstand. They recognized their genius, and the Japanese are.
Whenever singers, performers like Louis Armstrong and all these people came to Japan, they rolled out the red carpet.
Oh, and that continued on for good music all across the board, because I've interviewed all the cats from all the accompanist from James Taylor's bands, and when those guys would get off the plane, I mean, that's about as white folk as you can get. All the cats Japanese had the records waiting for them to sign them.
Absolutely. In fact, they still have my records.
Dude, I love the Japanese so much. I just the soul, man.
And the thing was, whenever any of the artists came to town, Louis Armstrong, I had a chance to go and meet them. I would be the only black person in the audience.
Let's talk. I want you to talk about meeting Louis Armstrong. That's also. I'm not sure. Did you ever the one person, and she passed away a couple years ago. The one cat whose story kind of is parallel to yours is a woman named Denise Perrier. Did you ever know her?
Denise Perrier.
Yeah, great singer. I'll send you the interview because she was doing tours on ships, U.S. in Vietnam and Japan. Anyway, she's
with the USO.
Yeah, I'm going to send you the interview so you can listen to it. She met Louis Armstrong. Who can you talk about meeting some of the original masters of music? I think that to me is, those cats were fearless. And I'm even going, Duke Ellington and they were beyond genius,
When I went to he was playing at one of the music halls. I think it was the Nichigeki. I gave him my Japanese, I forgot now. And so I went to see them, he and the band. And I got backstage, and then the band was shocked. He was like, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I live here." And I talked about my, living there and singing and whatever. And he just came over and grabbed my hand, and we shook, and gave me a hug.
Oh my God, I love this so much.
And warm, and I felt welcome. And the same with the Ella Fitzgerald. I met her.
Talk about Ella. I was going to ask you about. There was a few cats like Sarah Vaughan and Ella, and
I knew Sarah Vaughan. I met Sarah Vaughan here in Los Angeles. We were very good friends.
Well, you met her after you came back, though.
Yeah, after I came back to and start working in Los Angeles.
And you talk about, just like Ella Fitzgerald in Japan. That is insane. I just think that's just one of the coolest. That must have been such a cool experience. It was
wonderful. I felt a part of the gang, and the band was so elated the fact that I was a black person living in Japan.
Right. They didn't know Maxine Weldon. They saw you come into the room. They're like, "What is this woman doing here?" And you're like, "I'm actually I perform music. I sing here." That's unbelievable.
Yes. And I introduced myself. I'm told I was working there and as a singer. This is long before I had made records or anything like that.
Did some of the cats? I'm not sure who was in her band, but would they come and sit in with you in your gigs too to see what you were really all about?
Yes, we went up. The last we flew up that next day. We flew up to a town called Sendai.
Yeah, sure.
I was working at a club in Sendai, and they were doing a concert in Sendai, and we all flew up on the same plane together. And after, I guess, when they finished with their concert, the band came to the club where I was working. And, of course, Louis didn't either. He was probably tired.
Wait, hold on. This was a Louis Ella tour.
But the band came.
Oh, this is classic, dude.
Yeah, the band came to see me, and we sat and talked, and I introduced her some of the drinks that was popular.
Sure.
There.
What were the popular drinks there?
Oh God, I've forgotten now.
No, there's so much. That's just so because I don't know. Did you ever meet the percussionist Emil Richards? He's been on every sound. Rest in peace, Uncle Emil. The guy was with Sinatra and with George Shearing. But the point is that he went to Sendai with in Stan Kenton's band. This is after World War II, but that's really why the love of music and Americans is there, is because the music. They went up and down the island. They went up and down Japan playing together, and then ultimately. Hampton Hawes was over there, and ultimately Toshiko Akiyoshi got discovered there and got brought to the States. So, I know that you came in the 60s, but that to me is like, really, first of all, who were some of the cats in your band?
I'm sorry.
I'm saying like the rhythm section in your band in Japan. Who were those guys?
I did the clubs, and they had 18-piece bands, 18 pieces.
Japanese cats playing music.
I worked all the big clubs in Tokyo. They didn't have small clubs at that time. and
18. Oh, I just want to say 18-piece band. They were backing you up.
yes,
And these were all They were all Japanese cats.
all Japanese.
Oh my! Are you kidding me?
I'm very serious.
No, at 43, this is blowing my mind. First interview of 23 for me.
Yeah.
No, wait, hold on. So it was upright bass, drums, horns, guitar. What was the instrumentation?
I tell you what happened when I first went over there. I worked with a guy in Hawaii. His name was Ernie Washington, and he was the arranger for Dizzy Gillespie and all these people.
Oh my God!
He did my chart. I had three-piece chart. I'm sorry. And when I went to Japan, I sent my charts to the agency, and they had a very famous guy from the Philippines. His name was Pepe Murto, and he created the 18-piece band around my three-piece chart.
Whoa!
So when I worked the clubs, I worked with big bands. That's how I even today I always enjoyed working with big bands because I was used to it as a kid. I mean, a younger person. I was like 20 at that time.
I want to be clear though, when you're talking about the arrangement, I mean, you're not talking original Dizzy tunes. You're talking like American songbook tunes or what?
American songs, yeah.
Wow.
Songs like "Summertime," "Old Man River." I've forgotten my.
Yeah, I mean, in the lexicon, there's just so many Rodgers and Hammerstein, all these great, tunes. Can you talk about? In your mind, though, this is a fascinating question because there were no in-ear monitors at that time. A lot of the time, you were playing out of antiquated PA systems. I don't know if the clubs in Japan. I don't think the technology in Japan really got heady till maybe the 70s.
No. In Japan, you had first-class musicians. First-class.
No, what about the PAs you were playing out of? Could you really hear yourself?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Everything
Wow.
in Japan, first class. First class.
That's insane. That is absolute. You're telling me 18-piece band.
Yes, ma'am.
Crystal clear.
Yes. Yes.
Well, I am floored. In 1964.
Yes.
Oh
yes.
My God. What are the keys? So, what are the keys to swing in a big band for Maxine Weldon? I want to know this because I think in today's, I can't really speak for we don't have that touring circuit that was once so lush and provided for so many. Whether it was Sinatra, Tony Bennett, the list goes on. Even the jazzers. What would you say are the keys to swinging a big band for Maxine Weldon?
Well, because I did a combination of American songs and Japanese songs, so it was very easy for them to work with me because the Japanese songs they knew automatically, and I had those in 18 pieces as well.
Wow! And
there were some of the clubs work they had 16 pieces, some they had 14 pieces, but in the big club they had 18 pieces. And and the songs that I did, like, Old Man River and Summertime, and I'm trying to think of my resume, which I've forgotten, is blocked out of my mind. But they were popular songs because it wasn't any kind of new song that, and of course, here in America, all the songs that they were playing on the radio were all new. I wasn't doing that kind of music.
Sure.
And so when I went to Japan, I was doing I guess you would call it the older music, like with a lot of from the musicals.
Absolutely. No, the idea of like all those, Kingston Trio, that stuff was off the grid. You weren't doing like what was popular in the early 60s. The Beatles kind of hit around 64, but even before that, it was like, there was also just like incredible. I know you weren't necessarily ensconced in jazz at that time, but just like the jazz of the early 60s was it was the birth of the cool time, which is incredible.
Yeah, you would call them standard songs.
That's right.
Yeah.
What ultimately, you were eating amazing food. You had state-of-the-art PA systems. You had cooking bands. You learned Japanese. You were making dough. What brought you back to the States?
Well, I got married, and I went to Korea, and I worked I did the military clubs in Korea. I didn't go there I went with the special services, and then I went back to Korea, and I worked did the Korean music hall, and I met this Korean guy. We fell in love and got married, and and I found that later on that I was pregnant. And so that's when I decided I would come home, because I knew that in Bakersfield, since I had worked in medicine at the hospitals, I knew I could get first-class care.
Interesting.
After having a baby.
That was not necessarily the case in Japan or Korea.
Well, you could, but I wanted to come home at that time.
I dig. I totally dig. Yeah.
And in fact, he's alive and well today, and he's very successful and handsome and beautiful, and he's an agent for a commercial. You know, when kids and people do commercials on television.
He chooses them, yeah.
Yeah, he has a very successful agency.
You're talking about your son now?
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful.
And so, and I'm very proud of him. I mean, my marriage didn't last that long, but we got something very beautiful out of it, so I'm happy with that.
Well, I'm with you there. Ultimately, I mean, I have to be honest. I mean, my favorite record label is Mainstream Records by Bob Shad, and I have those records. I used to have your records on me. I still
have my records.
I would love you to talk about how that came to fruition, because
I met Bobby Shad through John Levy. When I was working in San Francisco, when I started back singing again after I had the baby, and after they had the baby, I started working on the nurses' registry so I could earn some money.
Sure.
And then I started back singing again, and then there was this gentleman who came up from Los Angeles, I guess, looking around trying to find singers, and he came to the club where I was working and introduced himself to me, and he worked with John Levy. And John Levy, I guess he called John Levy here in Los Angeles, and John Levy came up to San Francisco and signed me up, and that's how I got with Bobby Shad.
Now, this is so fascinating. I don't have a lot of, I've done 2,000 interviews, and I don't have a lot of cats that directly worked with you, but I need you to tell me about this gig at the Paper Doll.
Oh.
Because my dear brother, my uncle George Marsh, the drummer with the Jerry Hahn Brotherhood, said that
that's who I work with.
They backed you up, man. So first of all, here's the question: after you saved up some dough, doing some nursing, and your son was alive and well, what brought you to San Francisco?
Well, I moved from when I came back from Korea, and that's where I moved. My sister lived in Richmond.
Wow.
And I moved in with her, and I said, after living and traveling around Asia, the last place you want to live is Richmond, California.
I don't think anything's changed either. I mean, it's pretty rough out there still.
Anyway, I said, she was working in San Francisco, and so was I. That was when I started back working out of the nurses' registry.
Interesting.
And I said, why don't we move to San Francisco? She said, well, my friends are here. I said, well, I know your friends are here. I said, but I don't want to live here. I said, we could have so much fun finding us a beautiful apartment in San Francisco. So I talked her into it. And that's how we moved to San Francisco. And then when my sister Ann came up, she started working at they later on named it the Paper Doll, but first they used to call it the 524 Club.
The 524. Where was it located? Where was it located?
And it was in North Beach.
So it was around the Red Balloon and Carol Doda's club.
Yes.
Holy cat! Maxine Weldon blowing my mind. Right? Wait, hold on. This was this like six? Was this like?
Carol Doda, I knew these people.
No, I because I mean, dude, she was. I have interviews with cats who were playing 20-minute milestones while she was, dancing nude on the bandstand.
Yeah.
So were you? Were you singing with strippers, or is it just a straight?
No.
Yeah.
No, at the five. No, this 524 was a semi. It was half gay and half straight. It was like the only jazz club at that in that area.
What year? I'm sorry. What year was this, by the way?
This was in 1967.
And you're telling me that, how the heck? Because my 67. I mean, and then you get in with one of the most experimental fusion bands I've ever heard in my life with the Jerry Hahn Brotherhood. I mean, I could not believe that.
Yeah.
So, can you talk about how ultimately you wound up working with those cats?
They were working with Ann. It was Jerry Hahn on Randy Randolph on piano, Jerry Hahn on guitar. God, I can't think who was on bass.
Mel Graves, I think.
Mel Graves, and oh God, it was another guy. I can't think of his name.
What was it? Was George Marsh on drums?
George, thank you.
So it was. Can you just talk about how, you walked in there and one day and they're.
No, Ann, they were working with Ann.
They were working with Ann Weldon. So they were working with your sister.
They were working with my sister, and then when she went into the theater, she said, "Well, Maxine, why don't you come and work at the club?" And that's how I started back singing again.
When you say she went in so she went to
that was a theater club. They came. And she went and, started doing plays, and she went to Broadway and stuff.
Right. So the 524 was a jazz club. That you didn't.
Yeah.
There was no theater going on there, but she.
No.
So she was. What was her? So she was singing, kind of similar standard tunes or original tunes.
No, kind of, sort of.
Yeah.
She was doing a lot of Bob Dylan songs.
Wow.
And stuff like that.
Oh, I'm loving this, dude. Wait, what? So when you got it, was that the first time you started? I mean, I know you sang a lot of traditional Japanese folk tunes, but is it fair to say that you started to bust out some originals with those guys?
Yeah, well, that's when my music sort of changed at that time. I started doing Bob Dylan, and I always mixed some country and western in there, and doing more modern songs at that particular time. And of course, Jerry Hahn did my charts, and I don't remember exactly. I have to look back at my resume. I can think off the top of my head right now about the songs that I did, but I know they changed from what I was doing in Japan. But I would always sing a Japanese song for my audience. Let them know that that's something you don't forget.
Well, that is, first of all, please tell me that you worked some other clubs too besides the Paper Doll.
Yeah, there were two other clubs that I worked in San Francisco, but I mainly worked at it was called 524. Then later on, it changed to the Paper Doll.
What were the other clubs though?
The other club, it wasn't too many. What was another club called Leonara's.
Leonara's.
The owners didn't. The people were standing in line to get in there to hear me. So I worked there for quite some time. And usually when I worked at a club, I did pretty good, And so, and they paid me very well. That's why I didn't ever work a club in just 2 weeks and they would let me go. I stayed like a couple of years.
Absolutely. No, I just think it's, I mean, can you talk a little bit about how, ultimately that period of time was so incredibly fertile as it related to just the cross pollination of music that was going on. You had, I'm not saying that you wound up on a bill at the Fillmore West, but were you aware or hip to Janis and Jefferson Airplane? Did you get a chance to ever
I met Janis Joplin. I didn't ever meet the Jefferson Airplane.
You met Janis Joplin? Yeah.
And I met her. I went to see her at the Fillmore West with Jerry Hahn. And I just met her, saying, "How are you doing?" Whatever. And because she knew the owner of the Paper Doll.
Oh, this is classic. Wait, Hahn. So was Hahn kind of a conduit for you to get to see some of these these
Yeah,
what?
we went to see her at the
Fillmore.
Fillmore. We went backstage, and that's how I met her.
Oh, that is sick. Because I was going to ask you about the Fillmore district. Ultimately, Bill Graham took it by '67. Bill Graham had taken it over. But were you aware of the history? Fillmore district was very similar to Tulsa. What we were talking about at the beginning of the interview.
Yeah.
All black
I
commerce.
wasn't that much aware of it because I had just gotten on the music scene in San Francisco in 1967, 68, and 69. And
Sure.
So I guess I'm so busy with my thing.
Yeah, it wasn't like you were like a historian, like digging back in
Yeah.
the. No, it was like, but I mean, did Jerry ever take you? Like, was Bop City still active at that time? It was such a great where Pony Poindexter would play.
No, I wasn't. No, I just did my own thing at the time. I mean, we worked like 6 days a week, so we didn't get a chance to. I didn't get a chance to do too much. Plus, I had a child, and so.
Right.
But my going out and hanging out was a little limited, at that particular
Yeah,
time.
no, you were just trying to sing for your supper. So Shad was kind of that dude. Everything on Mainstream is just fierce. I mean, and
He's the biggest artist there were. They were all. That's how I met Sarah Vaughan.
I'm looking at her album on Mainstream right now, and in fact, truth be told, the first act I don't know if you know this, but the first act that Shad signed was Big Brother and the Holding Company without Janice. That was the first record he ever produced. So, the two the two albums. I'm looking here. The first one. Can you talk a little bit about being in? That was the first time you were in the studio.
Yes.
And you talk a little bit about that experience.
Well, he picked I had the top musicians in the industry on both albums. And
Let's just talk. So, Right On, that was their first album. Who was that with Earl Palmer? Who was on that album? That album.
Oh, let me see. Hold on.
Yeah.
I think I have one here. Hold on a minute. I'm trying to think who was on there. Got me thinking here.
That's good. That's what I try to do. Yeah.
Wait a minute. I got here.
Because it looked like it was more of like the old guard LA musicians. I don't think the Crusaders came along till Chilly Wind, but I could be wrong about that.
No, I had. Let me see. Right On. Oh, here it is. Here. Just a second. I have Blue Mitchell and. Let me see. Hold on a minute.
Oh my God, Blue freaking Mitchell was on Right On. That is sick.
Let me see. I'm looking at who's on there. Hold on a minute.
Yep.
Let's see. See. Oh, I had Joe Sample.
Whoa.
Paul Humphrey.
Oh
Earl Palmer. Carol Kay. Joe Osborne. All these people were on there.
I'm sorry. Did you say Joe Osborne? Joe Osborne?
Yeah, Joe Osborne. Mm-hmm.
So how did that work? Because like that to me, first of all, was it recorded out in Los Angeles?
I recorded in Los Angeles. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so, like, can you just talk?
Artie Butler was he and Leonard Feather did. That's when I first met Leonard Feather. He did the liner notes.
Leonard Feather. This is so you come down to L.A. Do you remember what studio you were in or no?
No, I forgot.
Not important. This is what I want you to talk about. The idea of, in today's world, my friends too are involved with this. It's unfortunate. In some ways, technology has really helped connect us. It connected me and you. But yet, now you have people that perseverate over perfecting a tune. It takes 4 months. They overdub constantly, trying to get to some level of perfection, which just takes all the soul out of the music. And the one thing that I loved about Mainstream especially is that there were some clams on those, not necessarily yours, but sometimes there were mistakes, clams, but it was just burning, visceral music. And I just wanted you to talk about the recording process. Was everybody in the room at the same time? Did you record the rhythm tracks before you sang, or did you just...
I remember, trying to think. I think everybody was in the room at the same time, and I was in this little
booth.
Little blue booth, yes.
You were in a booth, but yet it wasn't like everything was parceled out. Like rhythm was recorded first, and then you.
No, I think at that time everybody was in the same. The band was in one room, and I was in another.
And it sounds to me like it happened over a couple of different days because Paul Humphrey and Earl Palmer, those are two.
Yeah, I had Clifford Solomon, King Erickson was on conga.
My hero. I interviewed King. I love King,
James
man.
Horn, William Green on tenor sax.
Holy cow.
Gary Coleman, Victor Feldman, I got and Wilton Felder.
On bass or sax?
On bass.
Oh my God. Were you hip to the Jazz Crusaders before that?
Not really at that particular
That's
time.
cool. No, I love it because there's no reason why you would have been.
Yeah, I met them during that album.
Can you talk about, I really, as we enter this new year, Maxine, can you just talk about, I mean, Weldon is deep in my soul. So is Joe.
Mm-hmm.
Styx, I don't know if Styx showed up to your second album. I don't know if because it sounds like Humphrey and Earl Palmer played on your first one. But can you just talk about those cats and how much they lent themselves to just making it so easy on sessions?
They were nice guys to me. That was the first time that I had met them, and all of the guys in the band treated me like a lady. I mean, I got first class treatment from all of them, and so in fact, and we became friends. I became friends with Joe Sample and all. In fact, most of them was on my second album with Bobby Shad.
Okay, so the second album, like, how was? Because I mean, you had Gary Coleman and Victor Feldman. Those are like the top percussionists in the studio scene. So,
in fact, Paul Humphrey worked with me at the Etc. Club. You remember the Etc. Club here in Los Angeles?
Dude. So I just want that, dude. You're blowing me, dude. That guy was Lawrence Welk's drummer. Paul Humphrey was ridiculous drummer.
He was fabulous.
He was so my question is, after the first album, did any of the tunes get any kind of even some significant? Did anything catch and do any radio play? Was there any radio play for those tunes?
Yes, Johnny One Time did "Feeling All Right" and see.
Oh, I love this. I freaking love this.
That was like two or three of them that they played on the radio, and All Around the World by Titus Turner. That was played. Let me see.
Well, I'm curious though. I want you to talk about the first time that you heard one of your tunes on the radio in the car.
Oh God, I'm trying to think.
Because that to me is the magic of regional music at that time. You know, you had cats you had bands that would be based out of Los Angeles, and someone would call them and say, "Yeah, do you know that Sly Stone's playing your music up in San Francisco?" They'd have no clue.
Yeah, they just started playing. Of course, with Leonard Feather being involved, that's how I really got on radio.
Explain that. I didn't know Feather had a connection to radio.
He had a connection with everything. He
I know.
My liner notes. In fact, when I first came down to Los Angeles to sing and work, I worked at a club in Beverly Hills, and he came and gave me a review, and in the Los Angeles Times.
Was this after you? It was after you recorded your first album?
That was when I first recorded the.
So Feather just. So who do you have any idea how he got hip to you? Did Chad hip him to you?
I'm sorry.
I'm just curious about who hipped him to you.
He came to see me at this club in Beverly Hills.
Right. No, I did, but I mean, like you just randomly, or someone said, or someone pulled his coat to you.
I guess someone told him. I don't know. I just met him at the club.
So he wrote a review for the local paper.
Being on the music scene at that particular time, Los Angeles was not. It didn't have a lot of clubs,
Sure.
And if you were working a club in Beverly Hills, and that was the club where if you wanted to hit the big time.
Yeah, get discovered. I dig. I know, and it's funny because San Francisco was really the town that was known more for having live music clubs.
Yes.
Did you ever play like Basin Street West, or were you primarily in North Beach in San Francisco?
No, I only did the like I said, the Paper Doll. There was another club. I only did like 2 or 3 clubs in San Francisco, because at the Paper Doll, that's where I stayed. I mean, that was my club.
Well, you were getting good bread and good band and everything.
Yeah. And as long as I filled the room, that was they were happy. And that's the same when I came to Los Angeles. I worked at the Eccentric Club for 5 years.
Who was in that band besides Humphrey?
Oh, God, I had everybody in the band.
David T. Walker? Who else was in the band?
Not Jerry Hahn, but I had, oh, Jesus. Let me get my...
Come on, get that. I need to know who's in this band.
Who was in the band? Let me see.
It was like David T. Walker?
No, let me see. I had my own guys.
I love it. I freaking love it.
They stayed with me. They worked with me for several years. Let's see who I had. I had Jay Grayton.
Jay Grayton. Dude, he must have been like 16 years old.
Yeah, he was in fact, I was the first singer that he had ever worked
with. This is dude, you went to Never Everland on me just now. That's insane.
I had Jay Grayton, Dan Sawyer, Bill Torma, Bill Mays.
Bill Mays. Dude, you had some serious cats with you.
Greg Matheson.
Oh, my God.
Victor Feldman was on percussion. Woodwood, I had Don Menza. Bill
Oh, my
Green,
dear Uncle Don. Jesus. Who else?
Conti Condoli.
Oh, my God. This is West Coast, man.
Yeah.
Hold on. These cats were playing at the Etc. Club with you?
No, they were on my album, but but Jerry, Bill Torma and Dan Sawyer and Greg Matheson, they played at the Etc. Club. That was my band.
With Humphrey.
Yeah.
With Paul Humphrey on drums. That's so when
that was my band.
So you got Leonard Feather got you into the pipeline. You got some radio play. Did you actually were able to go out and tour the record?
No, I didn't. I stayed there at the club. I did. In fact, from the Etc. That's why I started doing the Tonight Show and all these shows. Merv Griffin,
Johnny Carson.
Yeah.
What do you mean doing them? Like showing up as a guest or actually being part of the band?
I performed
on a nightly basis.
Not on a nightly basis. Maybe about once or twice, 3 times a year.
Wow, that is unreal.
And I met everybody who was anybody at the Etc. Club. All the known people in music and in film, they all came to the Etc.
Who in film was like Clint Eastwood coming in?
No, I didn't meet him until later on.
Sidney Poitier, maybe.
Who?
Sidney Poitier.
Sidney Poitier.
Yeah.
I met them, and I met Peggy Lee. Let me see. Geez, anybody who was doing anything came to the club. It was a very popular club, and we had a good band. It was a good show.
Was it also like it was a club that it would have singers, but it would all like Miles would come there and Train and cats like that, or Train was dead by then.
They came there. I would work 6 weeks on and 2 weeks off. I did that for 5 years. 6 weeks I would work, and then I had 2 weeks off, and then they would have other musicians there. But that was my room. In fact, on the club, they had a big picture of my third album on the side of the club, and you can see it. You drive down Sunset, you can see that picture.
The club is still functioning?
No, after I left there in 1977, and it closed down a little after I left.
What I guess what I was saying is that was the club just a vocalese club or did it lend itself to instrumental bands too? Meaning, like, did Cannonball would cats show up in the crowd, or would they actually be on the bills there sometimes?
Well, on my 2 weeks off, they would have other people there. I don't remember too much who was working after when I was off.
Sure. How? Yeah. Go ahead.
But there were other people. There was other groups that worked there. But basically, it was my room. And like I say, I was there from 1971 to 1977.
The albums that you made, did you feel like, I hope that I asked this the right way. Who, I guess your sister and your folks were probably already educating you, get your publishing. Did that publishing some of the original tunes that you sang on those early albums on Mainstream help kind of keep you alive for a while, or at least keep your bank account in good standing?
Well, I didn't start writing until I went with Monument Records.
Okay, so the other record, the Mainstream records, were all cover songs.
No, and in fact, my piano player Randy Randolph wrote a couple of songs on there.
Randy Randolph. Who is Randy Randolph?
Randy Randolph he worked with Jerry Hahn.
I know. I'm loving. I need to know who this cat was, man.
Yeah, he was a top pianist.
Wow.
He worked with a lot of people.
So he wrote. You guys collaborated on a couple of original tunes.
At that particular time, I didn't. But he did. He and Bobby Shad's girlfriend wrote a lot of songs that I did. He did. Let me see. Tomorrow on My Mind. Let's see. He did Right On. That was on there. And let's see I don't have the other.
So basically, Randy was getting publishing for that stuff.
Yes. Oh yeah.
But you were really you can stay, because it's fascinating. I mean, you have been a live performing musician your whole life.
Yes. Yes.
Maxine, we're going to have to.
When I started working, after I got out of the working clubs and I started doing theater, the first theater I did was Black and Blue with Linda Hopkins. And we did the European version. And that's when I started working in Europe. I was in Europe like 12 years.
Well, yeah, because, I mean, your discography just stops. I mean, you clearly went overseas, Yeah,
I did.
Maxine, we're going to have to do set two, because this has been an absolute ball. We've been cooking here for like 70 minutes, but
I'll have some. I'll go through some stuff.
No, you did great. You did. I mean, my final question for you in set one, Maxine, is
okay.
How has music kept your spirit alive, and how has it made you? Can you just talk about the metaphysical qualities of healing music? Because I really believe that in this time, as disheartening as it is in terms of a lot of things, one of the goals of my show going into year 12 is to make sure that people recognize that musicians are as important as medical doctors.
That's true.
And I want you to just riff on that.
Yeah, it's just it keeps you, even though I have retired, but from music. But music is still in my heart, it's still in my soul. This is something that will always, when I go to my grave, it will go with me,
Yeah.
And so I can always, in my mind, in my head, it's always there. It's like being, you become your own doctor. That's
right. I mean, in general, you feel like it's saved you. It saved you.
It's something that stays with you, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. That was my calling in life. I didn't realize it at the time, but of course now that I know that that's what it was. And so, it stays with me. I don't have to sing a note anymore. In fact, I can very seldom do sing since I lost my hearing.
Well, no, you sang that Japanese song pretty darn well.
Yeah.
No, but you know what? It's really, I'm so honored that you kicked off 2023 on the Jake Feinberg Show, because, it's one of those things where I think also music has cumulative results. I can't tell you the amount of people that I talk to where these certain albums that I might really love, and they, when they made them at that time, they didn't think they'd amount to anything, or they, they haven't heard it since that time. And so I just feel like in this continual cycle as the continuum of music moves on, it's just important to glean as much information as possible about how things came together. And, I think it's just important, man. It's really an honor to connect with you.
Oh, thank you.
And I'll be transcribed. I'll get this interview up later. I'll send you a link to it, and then I'll be some great stories came out of here, so we'll be blasting it all over the internet.
Well, if I think of some more, we have to do a part 2.
Absolutely. No. We will. Let this breathe for a while. But yeah, this was a great 70 minutes in the books. We're on fire.
Okay. All right. It's just been a pleasure, and talking to you and thinking, because a lot of things that I hadn't thought over in a long time, and and I'm sure there are other stories that I have to tell.
Oh, there definitely are. So we'll do it again, Maxine. Much love. All right.
Bless your heart. Happy New Year, and God bless you.
Thank you, my friend. Back at you.
Okay.
All right. Be cool.
All right.
Later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.